Well, hello and welcome to the Psychedelic Diaries. I am your host, Ray Christian, and do we have a show for you today? Today, we'll be discussing DEA drug licenses, the psychedelic year in review, and of course, experiences on magic mushrooms. Chad Connor, the CEO and founder of Mycrodose, will be here for a deep dive and a soul search. And as usual, we'll get things started with a nugget and a noodle. In today's news nugget, another city in Washington has decriminalized psychedelics. It's a smaller town. It's called Port Townsend, but nevertheless, a nice piece of news as we wrap up 2021. And as for the noodle, something I've been noodling on of late is this last recorded episode in 2021 has me thinking of what an absolute unequivocal joy it is that we live in a world with this psychedelic renaissance. So many smart people, so many engaging people, creative paths to bring psychedelics to the masses. And yes, perhaps some of these psychedelic stocks have plummeted lately, but they were probably a little bit overvalued. Maybe just the normal ebb and flow of public companies. Maybe some of them have too many people that actually haven't done psychedelics and don't understand that you can't be a sex therapist that hasn't had sex. Maybe it's just part of the growth process for a new industry. A lot of fun questions to noodle on, though, for 2022. Which states will join Oregon in offering psilocybin at clinics? What's the best way to support people that want to trip in nature? And what state might be the first to launch a mushroom dispensary? A lot of questions, but one thing is for sure, this psychedelic renaissance has been a sight to behold. 100 years ago, we had the roaring 20s, and maybe this time we'll have the sporing 20s. No, as in mushroom spores. All right, we'll send that one back to the writer's room. Thank you to everyone that supported the show this year and everyone in the psychedelic industry. Well, that's it for a nugget and a noodle. Our next guest is the co-founder and CEO of Mycrodose, one of my favorites in the psychedelic industry, Chad Connor. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ray. Nice to be here.
Great to have you. So let's dive right in. Chad, you got a lot of fun news lately, and you secured a Schedule I DEA license to research not 1, 2, 3, but 4 psychedelic compounds.
Correct.
Psilocybin, MDMA, DMT, and LSD. Congratulations on that. No small feat.
Thank you.
How do you approach assessing all these various indications?
It's a great question. First of all, to get a DEA license is not easy. So that was a long process for us to get there. You have to work with the DEA. You have to be approved by the FDA. We're in California, so you even have to have the Secretary General of California approve you and his research board. So you have to have state and federal approval. So that was a long process. Luckily, we have our chief science officer that's been in pharmaceuticals for over 35 years. He's had Schedule I licenses. So who your researcher is, who writes your program and your research protocol really counts. So that was a big process overall. And the indications we're going after, is that your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, indication, that's a big one. You know, our company is called Mycrodose Therapeutics for a reason. We're the company that really specializes in the delivery of psychedelics. Our real niche, which is different than most companies in psychedelics, is we really focus on advanced drug delivery. So what we do is we have that knob that we can turn up the amount of active ingredient in your bloodstreams or turn it up or down. So you can have, let's say, a 1 through 10 of intensity of your active ingredient. So here being psilocybin or MDMA or LSD or DMT or ketamine. So we can turn that up or turn it down. So we can really dial in delivery, and then we control it and sustain it over time. That's really the base of advanced drug delivery, is you control the input and then you sustain it over time. Instead of an injection, it's an infusion. Like you see in the ketamine clinics where you infuse it. And this is what we do. All of our modes of delivery go directly into the bloodstream and they sustain and control it. So the indications we're going after is vast. We actually have 7 of them that we're looking to do drug development on. We're already in preclinical and we're going to be in FDA next year. We're looking at ketamine and psilocybin as our 2 main candidates that we're starting our drug development and looking at the indications. On the ketamine side, we have an advanced drug delivery lozenge that gets the active ingredient into your bloodstream through your mouth. So it's a lozenge that actually can be in your mouth anywhere from 30 minutes to 3 hours. And what that does is when you deliver into the mouth, you see these strips, right, where you get a flash dose. So it's a spike. What we do is we keep it in, we control it, and we sustain it. And when you want to get things through your mouth, you have to have a driving force in your ingredients, in your product. So this lozenge has a driving force, and that driving force takes time to get in through the oral mucosa into the bloodstream. So that's why it's in your mouth for a profound period of time. So in that, if you think about that technology, our first indication is mucositis. Mucositis is actually a cancer-related problem. When you get head, neck, throat cancers, you get radiated and your mouth looks like hamburger. There's no good products. There's mouthwashes. This lozenge works magic, particularly with ketamine. As we know, ketamine is a psychedelic, but it's also an anti-inflammatory. So it actually turns off the inflammation in the mouth, but also helps to regrow tissue. The mouth regrows really quick. It's a fast tissue. So if you think about ketamine, it helps with this also. So this is one of our indications. So long answer.
No, that's good. I appreciate that.
Systemically, so this is localized with mucositis. Our systemic application of ketamine with the lozenge is going to be a depression, a mental health condition, because we really focus on mental health, like a lot of psychedelic companies, and cognitive. We're also then looking at transdermal. We have a major focus on transdermal, and we're going to be delivering psilocin or psilocybin with our patch, and we're going after Fragile X. So Fragile X is a subset of autism. We're doing a joint venture with another public company called Novamentis, which actually has animal studies proving that psilocybin microdosed turns off all the biomarkers of Fragile X. And this is really important when we talk about this. A lot of people going after the mental health, they're doing the questionnaires, a 1 through 10, how am I feeling today? When we're looking at our drug development, we're really looking at biomarkers because it's easier to prove it's working than a 1 through 10 questionnaire, that you're seeing in mental health. So we're looking at things like cytokines, inflammation, RNA, DNA, serotonin levels, so we can actually have legit biomarkers.
Great call out. Thank you for that description and the insights. I love this idea of dialing it up and down to get a better dose, to make it a little bit smoother. Sometimes with psilocybin microdosing, it can be a little bit of a ride, a little bit wavy. And so it's nice to hear that you guys are doing that. Congrats on that Novamentis deal. And I love this idea of biomarkers. I've worked in mental health for a while, and the DSM guidelines, they are murky at best. So sticking with biomarkers is
murky.
Speaking of psilocybin, by the way, Chad, you guys won the award for Best Psilocybin Company, and I just love the fact that that is a thing now in the world. What is your favorite part so far of working in the psychedelic industry?
Wow, this is a great question. For me, first of all, in my career, I've always chosen paths of being on the forefront of an industry, the beginning of a building of an industry. I started I had a master in science and traditional Chinese medicine. I went into acupuncture, herbology for about 15 years. So I'm a practitioner at heart, worked a lot with mental health. And this is really when I was a practitioner, I saw that the root of all this dis-ease is mental, is emotional, is how we are in our minds. So right away, I realized if you don't work on the mental health of your patient, they don't get better, right? And so one of the things I really love is having access, being in the cutting edge of an industry. Then I went into cannabis, and we did advanced drug delivery and transdermal patches for cannabinoids, which was one of the first companies. Sold that company about 2 years ago. So that was another thing so psychedelics is kind of the ebb and flow of my life. It's the natural progression. So what I love about psychedelics, Ray, is to have access to a molecule that works with consciousness and awareness. I've been working on myself since I was 17, very, very passionate about that. I've always been on a path, always working on myself, and having access to a molecule that heightens awareness of our own patterns, for me, is magical. And I don't think we need to have a macrodose or a psychedelic trip to have that effect. I've done a lot of microdosing, and if you add enough, you heighten brain activity, you heighten interconnectivity of your brain, and you start being more aware of where I'm stuck. And for me, it is awareness or consciousness that changes us. It's not control or my superego telling me I'm a bad person, I need to change. It's like the thing of I have something on the stove that's hot, and if I touch it, I get burned. So when I realize that, I don't touch it anymore. I'm not controlling the fact that the thing I tell myself, hey, I can't touch that. I'm just aware of the truth, and I don't touch it anymore because I know it's hot. It's the same for consciousness. It's the same for our mental health. When we're aware of the patterns that stuck us, when we have no more neuroplasticity, we get stuck. And we see that as we age. So psychedelics, what I love is we can open that up. We can interconnect. We can heighten interconnectivity and consciousness and awareness. And for me, when I talk about it, I get the chills because for me, that's my passion, to have that. So that's what I love about it.
Oh, that's well put. I love that. And I think you're right. This goes so much further beyond just medical assays and the different markers. This is a change in your consciousness and 100%. Your existence. And it's like you can see yourself. It's almost like you get to rise above at a meta abstraction and see yourself as you're operating in the world in a way that you can't otherwise. Speaking of operating the world perhaps quite well, one quick note about the team. I'm very impressed with what you guys have done so far already. Thank you. And Patrick already, though, have had this now your second venture together. And I feel like anytime you come back that second time, it's an indication that one, you two guys are a good fit, but two, that it's just you guys are good at this and you understand how to be successful in business, and it requires a lot of tact. What is your secret for this work marriage that's worked so well?
Well, great question, Ray. I want to add that also Frank, our chief science officer, also I worked together for 4 or 5 years. Wow. So the 3 co-founders, there's 3 of us, there's Frank, Patrick, and I, we've all worked together. And we've worked together in my last company called Pure Ratios, which is still around. We had a 96-hour transdermal patch for pain, and we all developed that together. And what I learned from that company is that teams are one of the most important. If we have a couple pillars to build a company, having a team that's really close and can work together and is nourished to be a better human being, you have the best company in the world, right? So for me, it's about that team. It's about people that synergistically can work together. They have each other's back. There's a heart connection, but there's also ability to grow as human beings. And so that's what the 3 of us have. And we know how to balance each other. Frank is the crazy out of the box PhD physicist that knows how to deliver drugs. He's one of the godfathers. He was actually on the team of the nicotine patch back in the 80s. That's where transdermal actually was developed. So he's one of the forefathers of advanced drug delivery. So we have him there. That's really this unique German out of the box person. And then we have Patrick that is really the nuts and bolts, operations guy, right? So you need that guy that's going to run your company. You need the crazy scientist. And for me, how I just love putting teams together, raising money, developing a company and having successful exits. And so so we really balance each other. So that's really the team, it's so important when you're growing such a fast growing company. We're just growing so quick every month.
I love that description of Frank. And there are times where I've tried to microdose LSD and I have taken too much. And I have felt very much like a mad scientist, Rick and Morty, Rick just going off on a tear. And it's good to have that in there because there is it's like Shakespeare's Hamlet quote. There's something about being with that method and the madness together. And it sounds like you guys have balanced that. Speaking of which, you've got the transdermal patches. You got the transmucosal lozenges, excuse me, and you got a nose for product. I can tell, Chad. You told me once you're a product guy, and so am I. And I love how you actually put images of what the packaged product might look like pretty soon. And I'm curious, as we roadmap this out a little bit, are you planning for medical use only, or are you looking at potentially medical and recreational if states like Oregon eventually replicate this cannabis model?
Yeah, so we are right now 100% focused on the pharmaceutical side. So FDA development, workings, filing patents, going through the phases. And we're not looking to potentially bring our product to commercialization, but we'll probably sell it to a company that will take it there after a phase 2. So that's our focus. Put that aside. If there is access to this in a clinical model, I get very passionate. I've been an herbalist for 20 years. And I believe that mixing things like psilocybin with other functional herbs or functional mushrooms would be really magical. So if I have the ability to do that in my career, I'll do it, just because I believe it's a plant medicine, right? It's a spirit molecule when it comes to psilocybin. If I can add that in with other functional mushrooms like chaga or reishi, I already have 4 formulas in my head I would love to do, where we'd add it together and really focus psilocybin in different directions, because it has different therapeutic paths, just like cannabis does. So I would absolutely love to do that. Really look down the more nutraceutical side, the functional medicine side, which is a big part of my background. I love pharmaceuticals too. So it's really, I feel like me personally, I really straddle both sides. Because in one sense, my career has been on the natural medicine side and also on the pharmaceutical. And I love mixing those two together. So we definitely would create products. Right now, I don't know if that's going to happen. I'm hoping it will. Oregon already passed, like you mentioned. So we'll see what the legal regulatory framework is. Right now, with our Schedule I licenses, we only can do pharmaceutical development. And we'll never be able with those licenses to develop a product for Oregon. It has to go through insurance, FDA, and eventually the insurance would cover it and doctors will prescribe it. So yes, I love it, but right now our focus is laser focused on the pharmaceutical development.
I appreciate that. And I think to do it the way you're doing it is the judicious route. You've got to go this way to get it out there. And you got to work with the system, within the system, at least for now. Maybe if the pace of progress does accelerate and we look at the slope of what happened with cannabis, where it went from awareness to then decrim to then legalization, if that applies to psychedelics, I think you and I would be pretty happy about that. Let me just say this. Thank you, Chad, for being one of these guys out there at the vanguard, tip of the spear, one of these guys moving the needle, that's articulate, that's intelligent, and just fucking doing it. So thank you for that.
Speaking of which, one thing I want to add just quickly is, the pharmaceutical development is important because then insurance can cover the product. So what happens, it opens up for everyone. If your doctor prescribes something, you take it, right? When it goes to a dispensary, I was in cannabis for 6 years. A lot of older people or people that are maybe a little bit more scared will not go to a dispensary to buy something. They'll only go if they're a doctor. So I do think pharmaceuticals is very important because it opens it to the masses, right? Our insurance will cover it. And at the same time, I love the wellness markets and, the functional medicine and the nutraceuticals. So I think both are needed, really.
So Chad, my discovery about 5 or 6 years ago about what magic mushrooms can do for specifically cognition, creativity, and purpose, it fundamentally changed the trajectory of my life. And I'm curious for you, what has your journey with psychedelics been like?
It's been a long journey. I started using psychedelics when I was actually 17, 18. I think we all kind of dabbled at that age. And at that time, I was already on a spiritual path, looking at personal growth. And when I dabbled in psychedelics, what I found real quickly is it opened me to what I call the spiritual dimension. And it opened me as a tourist, not as a resident. So at the beginning, my consciousness started to realize what's possible as a human being. And in those paths, what I started realizing on these psychedelic trips is that we're all connected and interconnected. This whole idea of unity really came up for me. And it's been a consistent thread for me my whole life to understand the idea of that we're not separate, that what's in you and what makes me is the same thing. And this idea of separation, that there's a you and me, is for me the definition of ego. When we start to see through our egos, the first thing we see is we're all humans. We're all in the same boat. You're unique, I'm unique, but we are all interconnected. We're all the same thing. We're made of the same substance. And psychedelics open that door for me in that window into that dimension. So for me, realizing that was just fuel on my own spiritual path. I studied with a shaman for a year in Mexico. So I had that kind of set and setting, with the music and the teepees and the sweat lodges. And I think that for me was probably the most important. Really having somebody to guide me in those experiences, I got a lot more out of it. But again, in my own path, I'm not a shaman. I'm not doing psychedelics every week or every month. But I believe that my own now personal growth and spiritual path, I can get there without psychedelics, but it takes a lot more time. So my path on psychedelics was really realizing what's possible for a human being. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that share. And I agree. I had a stretch where I went years where it's basically once a month. I was doing a pretty large session, and there were certain sessions that would be profound. And, for one, it was I met God. And
Sure.
Another one was I felt my soul moved in and out of my human avatar. But it was one of those things where once you've seen it, once you've had the meeting with God, he or she's not going to be doing like a weekly meetup with you. They understand that you can't unsee that. And so you don't need a lot of these deeper trips. And after doing it once a month for a long time, I can feel that the medicine just quite simply isn't calling me as much.
Yeah.
Speaking of the big trips though,
right? This is where microdosing comes in, Ray, because you can have the macrodose, which I believe in, the clinical setting, you're with your psychologist, you have the macrodose, you transform something, but imagine in between, if I can give you a product that turns up the amount in your bloodstream to a level where it's subperceptual, but I'm still getting that interconnectivity of my brain, this is the magical formula for me. And that's the blockbuster pharmaceutical ingredient. I want to make products for the masses, for children, adults, and elderly, not the small fragment of adults that are willing to take a macrodose, which I love. I'm a firm believer, but I want to develop something for children. That's why we're doing the Fragile X product. It's the first time I've ever seen announced a psilocybin for children that's been approved as an orphan indication in Europe and US already. So this is really the cutting edge for me. You can't do that with a sledgehammer in your brain with a macrodose. You need the microdose, right? And to have a product where you can control and sustain it, you have a higher safety profile. So you can give it to children. You're quicker through the FDA. You're not going to worry about the bad trip. I've had bad trips that they're not fun, right? You can have psychosis. That's why the control is important. That's why you need a psychologist. Not just doing it by yourself often is not the way.
Well, I might fight you on that one. I have done it quite a bit on my own, and those have been some of my most meaningful trips. But
yeah,
I'm not everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody's got their own path, and some people need the guide, need the psychologist,
sure.
and I appreciate that. And I like that you're talking about, you're not just saying, look, this is for adults that want the big trips that are mentally ill. This is for everybody. And this is so safe that it's also good for the elderly and the children. And I'm with you. I'm a big believer in microdosing as well, whether it's psilocybin or LSD. I think you got to do both, or at least do the microdosing, I would say, to open up the path. One last little thought for you, Chad, a question on the big doses. So, would love to see if you can take a stab at diving into one of your bigger trips. And I had one where it felt as if I was time traveling almost. I became this disembodied consciousness, and I was moving throughout time. And for some reason, I was left with the sensation that I was seeing past lives or past experience. And I had one where I had this very visceral experience of, I was there on this hill overlooking the Mediterranean in antiquity, thousands of years ago. And it was some life that I may have lived before. And all these experiences are ineffable, but it left me with this sensation that, perhaps the Buddhists and the Hindus, what they talk about with reincarnation, they might be onto something. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious for you, what is one particular profound experience that still resonates with you?
Yeah, for me, well, I have two that come to mind. I'll speak about one of them. This was when I was in my early 20s. All my psychedelic experiences, I've always done it in nature. For me, without the set and setting, like I wouldn't do it in my house, for example. I need to be out in nature. So this was out in nature here in San Diego. I was with a group of friends and we did psilocybin. During that psychedelic experience, what happened for me is I felt like there was a channel that opened from me, from my head up to the sky or up to the universe. And it was really like this channel where it felt like a download. And the download was just realizing that what I mentioned before, that I'm not separate, that everything's interconnected. And it was as if somebody was speaking through me, and just the knowledge that was able to come through that channel, through my own location, through my mouth, it was just awestruck. It was as everything is one, nothing separate. There's no such thing as past and future. Everything is in the moment. It was just this really melting into this mystical experience of unity, of really melting away the sense of Chad as a story, and realizing that Chad is not a story. He's just something that's everywhere. And it's kind of that feeling where you're realizing that you were never born and you're never going to die. So that idea, kind of reincarnation or immortality, that's where I started to have that realization. It was in that experience. And I had a couple other experiences very similar than that.
Chad, that's beautiful. Thank you for that share. And the way you described that, this idea of the channel from up above and this download, it reminds me of it's like a couple of those illuminations on these experiences. It's like you're Neo in the Matrix, where you get this download of like, I know Kung Fu now. Yeah, I could downloaded it.
Yeah,
that is beautiful. Thank you for that share. One last little question before we switch over to the soul search. Chad, what's got you excited that's coming down the pipeline for Mycrodose?
So we are going to be announcing a joint venture with a very large public company outside the psychedelic sector, beginning of the year. This project really excites me because it's a botanical, and it's psychoactive, but not psychedelic. I can't announce it yet because they're a public company and you got to be quiet. But it really excites me because we're looking to do a pharmaceutical product with a botanical drug for smoking cessation and general anxiety disorder. This really excites me because I'm going to be working a joint venture with a company that I've known for 30 years that I really, really like. So we're doing a joint venture on that product. So that's happening beginning of next year. We'll be announcing it. That really excites me. The team in that company, working with them so far, has been incredible. So really 2022 is going to be that, but also getting into the FDA. We'll be in a phase 1 and phase 2 trials next year, really proving out our products. That also excites me coming up, to really get these products through and showing, hey, microdosing's working, right? Because a lot of people, think, oh, it's placebo or not.
And congrats on fingers crossed, but it sounds like you're almost over the finish line on the JV. That's a lot of work. Very curious to see what that looks like. There's botanicals use case for anxiety in combination with psilocybin with smoking cessation as well. We'll keep an eye out for that. Good luck with the FDA approvals. We got to switch over to the soul search. Question number 1. You are on a desert island for 10 years and it's just you, and you only get one mind-altering substance. Who you got?
Ooh, LSD.
I like that.
LSD for me, psilocybin I love, but it gives me digestive problems. If I take a big trip, I'm hurting for several hours. LSD, I don't have that. And LSD tends to open me up a little bit more. So it would be LSD.
LSD. Okay. Not mad at that. Question number 2. Chad, what is one person that has had a profound impact on your career?
Ooh. That's a good question. I've had many. On my career, I'm going to give shout out to Frank. He's my chief science officer. He's really been my mentor on understanding the importance of delivery. So I'm going to give a shout out to him. He's really changed my career to really kind of shift from really being natural medicine focused over to the scientific kind of pharmaceutical, really single molecule side and understanding delivery. So Frank Kochinke, my chief science officer, thank you.
That's cool. I'm sure that would warm his heart to hear that. Okay. Question number 3, Chad, you get to relive the life of any historical figure. Who you got?
Jesus.
Good choice. I'd love to see what that would be like.
There's many.
Some people are saying he was on psychedelics.
Wow. There's so many. Yeah, Rumi would be a good one.
The famous Persian poet. Good call. Okay, final question, somewhat apropos of your last answer. So, Chad, you are walking down the street. You're kind of parched. You want to wet your beak, so you pop into a bar, pull up a chair, and sitting there next to you is God. And he says, "Hey, Chad, you know what, dude? Big fan of your work. By the way, I got to run. I got this date with a goddess down the street, but I got time for one question. Chad, what is the one question that you would ask God?"
Yeah, why did you invent time?
Why did you invent time? Okay. Not mad at that. Chad, Connor, last little question for you to plug a little bit if you want. Where can the viewers find you, or do you have any requests of them?
You can find us we have our website, microdosethera.com. It's MY for micro, not MI. So you can find us there. Keep looking at us, and really, what I want to ask the listeners, I would want to say that use psychedelics responsibly. And I would say if you use them with support, use them with people that really have a good set and setting. If you're doing a macro dose, set up your space before you do it. That would be my ask of the listeners.
That's good. Set and setting, use them responsibly. Well, to the viewers, thank you for joining this episode of Psychedelic Diaries. He is Chad Connor, CEO and co-founder of Mycrodose Therapeutics. I am Ray Christian. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.